hear the voice. There we go. Lovely. Feel free to kick off whenever you feel comfortable, Eva.
Amazing. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending today's panel discussion. And thank you for joining the first Inside Global Life Science series. We hope after today's event, you will also join our next events with other regions. But let's also welcome Denmark and Norway, Markus and Andy, who will talk today about the ecosystem of these two regions, and Renee, who will shortly introduce the series and their goal and their target audience and similar things. So, Renee, please feel free to start.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Renee, and I'm part of the Nucleate Global Strategy team. So as Eva mentioned, I'm just going to quickly talk about what this series is about. So it's our very first fireside chat series under Global Life Sciences. And this series is designed to explore biotech ecosystems around the world. And we will highlight regional opportunities, challenges, and trends to help academic trainees to learn more about these opportunities that are that exists outside of traditionally well-known biotech hubs. So today, as Eva mentioned earlier, we're kicking things off with a great lineup of speakers, Markus and Andy, who will share insights into your local biotech ecosystems. And we would encourage you to drop your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to them in the last 15 minutes of the meeting. And now I'll turn it back over to Eva, who's the co-MD of Nucleate Norway chapter, to moderate the panel.
Amazing. Thank you very much for such a nice introduction. And now let's welcome Markus and Andy, virtual club. And can you please say a few words or maybe sentences about both of you, what you are doing, where are you based, and whatever you want to share with us.
Go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to, I guess, to anyone from the US who's joined very, very early. My name's Andy Boyce. I'm a senior advisor for Digital Life Norway, which is a network for Norwegian biotechnology. So we support around 500 million NOK of R&D research in biotechnology in Norway, mainly in academia. And we do that through a number of mechanisms, including Norway's largest research school, support with multidisciplinary networking, responsible research and innovation, data management, and then innovation, which I'm involved in. I also lead something called the Innovation Roadmap, which is our efforts to develop a new strategy to support more innovation in Norwegian biotech. My background has kind of always been in that interface between academia and industry. So I have a PhD in molecular biology a long time ago. I worked for the UK Research Councils on an emerging area, as it was then, called synthetic biology. I worked at the University of Bristol supporting commercialization from their synthetic biology centre and helped to spin out a few companies. And I founded a diagnostics platform technology company from the University of Bristol. I led that company as CEO for a few years before moving across into consulting, mainly with venture capital and supporting other new startups. And then finally moved to Norway, mainly actually just for kind of family and quality of life reasons. But there's also some really exciting stuff in here, which I've been involved in for the last 18 months or so.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, representing Denmark. I guess it sounds like a Eurovision Song Contest. 12 points, Norway. So I'm at the Bioinnovation Institute, or BII, located in Copenhagen. We are an accelerator and incubator focusing primarily on life science, a little bit on deep tech, that has, over the last 7 years, funded about 130 companies or projects aimed at bringing innovation to the market. We have a pretty big portfolio, active portfolio of companies, and every year we take in another 25 new startups or opportunities to work with the aim of generating value for people and society. From those, we both fund the companies, we run acceleration programs, and have an incubator space that I'm sitting at currently. A little bit about my background. I've been at BI for 5 years, responsible for science and technology strategy elements, as well as our infrastructure, and both digital and physical infrastructure. And then also previously I was responsible for education initiatives like our summer school. I have been previously working both in academia and startup settings in R&D roles, different R&D roles, from like scientist to manager, and also in the innovation side of the university setting, working on spinning out companies out of dedicated research centers, both here in Denmark and in the US. And I have my original background is as a bioengineer with a PhD in bioengineering. Great to be part of this.
Fascinating. Apart from being a co-managing director of a Norwegian chapter of Nucleate, I'm actually spending quite a lot of time in Copenhagen due to personal work reasons. So this session is also of a personal interest for me because I really see the future in biotech in both Denmark and Norway. So considering a great future in this region, maybe we can transition to the key players and organization in both Norway and Denmark. Of course, I can imagine that BII and Digital Law of Norway are the main organization there, but maybe you can also cover some other organization that push life science forward.
Sure. I mean, I can go first again. So, I mean, Norway's got a kind of interesting biotechnology ecosystem, I guess, especially compared to my main background in the UK and also to Denmark, which Markus will talk about. I should say before I start, actually, I've only been here for 18 months, so I'm almost certainly going to miss someone out of the Norwegian ecosystem, so apologies in advance for that. But I think one of the things about Norway is it doesn't have its kind of own homegrown big biotech company. So that means there isn't quite the same kind of industry pool or investment push into some of the early stage biotechs like you see in the UK and Denmark. But what it does have is a considerable strength in kind of broader biotechnological areas. So lots of marine aquaculture activities based on Norway's natural resources. And then real strength in the med tech and digital health sector. And that's been supported by some big investments from the Norwegian government in AI. So you might have seen this 1 billion kroner for AI investment last year. And Norway also kind of leads the way in terms of digitizing all of its government services, including health. So there's lots of conversations going on at the moment about how to kind of safely leverage all of that health data to support more innovation in the health sector in Norway.
Amazing. And what
Sure.
about the Denmark?
Yeah, so the Denmark as maybe almost the polar opposite, despite being quite close, both geographically and linguistically. So Denmark is a pretty strong homegrown pharmaceutical industry. Novo Nordisk being the giant here, but also other big pharma companies being quite active here, and also has very strong traditional agriculture, food industries. Of course, beverages also. Companies like Arla, Carlsberg, Novo Nordisk, which is the enzyme producer. So quite a lot of biotech. It's actually one of the countries with the largest fraction of the GDP coming out of life science biotech. The other part, and in contrast, it's much weaker on, I would say, in medtech and digital or like traditional tech. Software is not a huge field in Denmark. I mean, there are of course tech companies, but it's nothing compared to some of the other ecosystems that are super active on that. The other thing that's is peculiar or different here is that a lot of the research funding and also the innovation funding comes from big foundations that complement kind of the government's funding. So a lot of initiatives that in many countries would be run by the governments are run here by foundations, including BII, which is a foundation on its own. So I think that makes for an interesting ecosystem and a little bit different dynamics than many European countries.
It sounds very interesting. So based on what you are saying, it seems like Norway has a bit more of a trend towards ecotech, while Denmark has a bit more trend towards biotech. But what do you think will be the main future investments in both of the regions? For example, in Denmark, I've heard that there is a Gefion, the huge supercomputer, so there will be probably lots of investments in the computational research, especially quantum research and AI, What do you think about this, Markus?
Yeah, so I mean, the sort of investment landscape in terms of startups getting funding has been traditionally very heavy for biotech of the pharmaceutical kind. There have been venture funds in Denmark, active in Denmark for tens of years, doing that. They have been more focused on the planetary health side, the food, ag, chemicals, materials, etc., in the last 5 to 10 years. And then more recently, quite a lot of focus in specific deep tech areas like quantum and also in the AI space to sort of strengthen that side, which, as I mentioned, is maybe not the strongest traditional side on the startup side, but now it's sort of a coherent effort to build really, really strong quantum ecosystem, for example.
Very interesting. What about Norway? I think it may be a bit more towards the global climate changes. I've heard that Norway has almost all cars already electric, so it seems like the government invests a lot in supporting the climate changes and helping to save the planet.
Yeah, I mean, Norway has this kind of very strange kind of convergence of things which made it perfect for electric cars. Norway's traditionally had very cheap electricity from hydropower, so very green as well as being very cheap. Even though Norway extracts a lot of oil, nearly all of that is sold overseas. Which leads to the government having quite a lot of income, which goes into the sovereign wealth fund. And then the government made a kind of conscious decision that it wanted vehicles to be electrified, and they had very nice kind of incentives to enable that. And they put lots of money into the kind of infrastructure as well, charging infrastructure and other things that just kind of made it possible to get over the hump. To make that easy. Yeah, and it's something like 90% of all new cars sold in Norway is electric. So yeah, I think that's a kind of real success story.
It sounds very impressive. But coming back to more of entrepreneurship and early startup side, you mentioned, Markus, that Denmark is interested in entrepreneurs and startups. What do you think about the opportunities and like places to start your own business in life sciences in Denmark? Probably it's Copenhagen, right? And many facilities and organizations there.
Sure, I think, Copenhagen is the center of a lot of the investment activities, but actually Aarhus is also very active on the biotech side and the sustainability side. So sort of the two major cities are both pretty active. The corporate side is a little bit stronger in Copenhagen, but more the food industry is then on the Jutland side, Aarhus. So there's some sort of traditional strengths geographically within the country. And then there are smaller cities, for example, Odense is very strong in robotics and areas like that. So there you see a little bit more the technology of that type of deep tech and AI focus. But yeah, that's what I would say on the life science side. It's a little bit two primary poles where things are happening in this country.
So do you think it's something easy to become an entrepreneur in bio or ecotech in Denmark and then in Norway?
I don't know about that. I mean, we are trying a lot to make it. It's not easy, but we are trying to make it so that you are not going to stumble right away in the beginning, so that academic founders or researchers or engineers who want to start companies, they have a way to get going. They get the support, they get the mentoring, they get the training, they get the funding to get a standard company off the ground. So I think we're doing a lot for that. The government also has some pretty good initiatives for early stage companies. Denmark is known as a pretty good country to start companies in. It's very simple. I mean, I could probably during this conversation here, I could register a company online if I wanted. So the paperwork is simple. So in that sense, the barriers are relatively low, and then it's more about other things about attracting talent when you get into a bigger company where I think the ecosystem still can grow quite a bit. But getting things started here is pretty easy. We are trying to make it as easy as possible so that great ideas get commercialized and brought to market.
It's really nice because usually getting started is the hardest part. But then what is how it is in Norway? Is it also easy to start, or there are other opportunities and challenges?
I mean, I think we're very envious of the Danish ecosystem, but there are some great opportunities as well in Norway. I mean, there's been some great successes as well. Algeta obviously sold to Bayer. That was 10 years ago now, but it's a great example of what is possible. And there are some kind of great hubs for R&D in Norway. It's a bit more spread out. You know, we have several centres: Oslo, Trondheim, Tromsø, Bergen on the medical side. So slightly more spread out, a little bit more fragmented, perhaps than the kind of Copenhagen system. And it's kind of part of the reason that Digital Life exists is to try to kind of overcome some of that fragmentation and draw that together. But it's perhaps not something which has been completely solved just yet. But I think, I mean, one of the strengths of Norway is it's kind of fantastically wealthy country. I mean, obviously Denmark is as well, but you know, Norway has this sovereign wealth fund, it's $1.8 trillion sitting there. So it kind of has, you know, a great scope to do things that it wants to do. And I think there's a role for organizations like ours and others to kind of make the case that biotechnology is really important for the future of Norway, and to articulate there's an opportunity sitting there for Norway, and not to just kind of replicate Denmark. We probably could never do that anyway, because you can't just like invent a giant pharmaceutical company and plonk it in your country, but to kind of leverage what are the kind of Norwegian opportunities.
Yeah, sounds definitely amazing. And it seems like Denmark and Norway has quite many things in common. For example, Andy, you mentioned that you moved to Norway because of work-life balance and great economy. And Denmark is also famous for work-life balance and very nice and high standards of living. So do you think it's something beneficial for founders and entrepreneurs, or it's something that actually slows down the progress?
Well, I think entrepreneurship is definitely for the long haul, right? Especially if you're in life science, it's going to be quite a long road. So work-life balance is extremely important, or figuring out how to manage that. Otherwise, as a founder, you will not make it through. We focus actually quite a bit also on the mental health aspects of being a founder. It can be a little bit lonely for a small team of people to get going, and then sort of slowly start building up your company. So that's important for us as in our acceleration programs. But we can also see that that's actually been quite a focal point also for tech people in Denmark, is to sort of not just be a tech bro based thing, but like based on actually supporting people in the challenges they have and letting them find the good solutions. I think the other thing that is very much in common in Norway and Denmark is this focus on health and sustainability overall. So like the countries, it's not about generating wealth, it's actually generating value for society by having healthier people, having more sustainable societies. And that's not just like sort of a impact words, but it's something that people actually strongly believe in. The society believes in, that people want these solutions. So it's a good place to build a company with that type of focus.
It's really
Yeah,
nice.
I guess I would agree. I mean, work-life balance is important, and I think it's something that you can only push for so long, and then suddenly you kind of realize that it's something that's really important. I guess I mean one thing for Norway is it's like is the kind of size, the kind of critical mass element, and it can make it, it's still relatively easy to start a company here. One of the challenges is around kind of then what's your kind of user and customer base for what you're developing, and you'll almost certainly have to very quickly get out of Norway in terms of like selling into Europe, selling to the US. If you want to do clinical trials, you may not have like the critical mass of patients and other things. So I think people looking to start a company in Norway have to have a kind of international element or mindset baked in very early.
Do you think this is something that young entrepreneurs should think about collaboration between different countries, or maybe even Denmark and Norway. Maybe Denmark and Norway already have famous and successful collaboration that you can share with us, especially in life sciences.
Yeah, we have definitely funded some Norwegian companies and also had companies explore Norwegian markets, especially in areas like aquaculture. So I mean, it's quite common that you will have to look for different markets or maybe collaborate in terms of the science. So we overall, I think, global outlook, of course, in terms of where you bring your products to market, as Andy mentions, is important. Same goes for things like clinical trials, that setting them up in the right places is more important than setting them up in your backyard. So you want to work with the people who have the right patient population, the right competencies. And that's what we see consistently. So of course, building up on the strengths that you have in the local ecosystem, but never limiting yourself to thinking that this is the end game.
Amazing. What do you think, Andy? Can you
Yeah, I
come
mean, I
up
think
with an example?
collaboration is, yeah, I mean, collaboration is always great. I mean, we've actually funded people to go over to BII because it's such a kind of inspirational place to go. And I mean, you have this kind of tension because governments fund science in their own country, which is kind of always an economic argument around, supporting innovation and entrepreneurship for economic return in that country. But I think, in a kind of smaller ecosystem, I think you have to think more broadly, and I think it goes both ways. We're as likely to kind of get some commercial activity from a company started, in Denmark as vice versa. So I think that the less we can think in that kind of siloed way, the better, really. And certainly we encourage people to leverage some of the opportunities that are available in Denmark.
It sounds amazing. But from my personal experience, I find sometimes collaboration may be challenges just because of different expectation, different pace, different culture. Do you think there is something like this between Norway and Denmark? Though the regions are very similar with similar Scandinavian models, but do you think there is like key cultural or other type of difference that create challenges in collaborations?
I would think it's not that much. I mean, in the Nordics there are some traditional like competition situations where countries first look at competing with each other and then they will compete with the rest of the world. But it's also hopefully only limited to sports, where Norway definitely in the winter sports will wipe the ground with Denmark anytime. I think. If collaboration is sometimes made a little bit difficult, is because the funding instruments that would fund collaborative research are a little bit limited at the end of the day, or in Europe they're primarily at the EU level. But in life science in particular, for research funding, there are really good opportunities due to the Novo Nordisk Foundation, which is a Danish research foundation, actually funding research in Nordic countries in general quite generously. So I think this creates actually really good opportunities because you have a funding agency that can actually do that, specifically focusing on Nordics.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think if you're a Norwegian entrepreneur, you probably find it easier to work with someone from Denmark than plenty of other places around the world. So less kind of cultural different. I think they're both kind of quite kind of open cultures, and yeah, I think there's a general kind of play nice attitude, I think, that kind of stretches across both. So I wouldn't see there being any kind of major barrier, other than certainly not to start up. I think, as kind of Markus says, as you kind of grow and go into scale up, then you get into the kind of boundaries of where your investors are located, what the taxation rules and all of those kind of things are.
Well, based on what you are saying, it seems very promising, and I believe that many of our guests will want to start a company either in Denmark or Norway just after our talk. But coming back to the opportunities in each of the regions, maybe you can share specific organizations or courses or VCs or accelerators region-based that people can look into to, for example, learn the basic of entrepreneurship in life sciences. Because for me as a PhD student in the academic lab, it can be very challenging to understand what, for example, VC is looking for, or what exactly the steps do I need to take to transition from academic lab to a company. Do you have specific educational events or programs like this? And maybe you can share who exactly are running them and what they're focusing on. We can start from Norway, for example.
Yeah, thanks for setting me up there for my plug, Eva. So Digital Life Norway is partnered with ALEAP, which is a health tech incubator in Oslo, to develop the Forge, which is Norway's first national biotech accelerator program. We're really excited to run it this year, and we hope we're going to run it for many more years. It's a 6-month program with a mixture of kind of physical meetings and online training over 6 months, in a kind of recognition that we're looking for kind of deep tech ideas that take quite a long time to incubate and develop. And if anyone is sat in Norway, it's only open to Norwegian researchers and early stage Norwegian companies. But if anyone is interested, we'll stick a link in the chat. You only have 1 week left to apply. It's a fairly simple application process. You can apply on the Digital Life Norway website. There is a small cost to attend, but we're also offering a small number of grants for the best teams who haven't got their own funding to facilitate their participation. So thanks for an opportunity to plug, which is slightly competitive with Nucleate's activities, but I think that's, as a general point, I think we just try to be collaborative with other people doing similar things. And very often we see people do these kind of courses more than once. Because often the first time you're taking on so much information, you're kind of drinking from the fire hydrant, and then I think I've seen the second time people take part in these training activities, they can focus much more on what it means for them and their business and their technology. So we're supportive of all of the courses, all the great courses at BII and across Norway, and we're excited to add ours to the mix as well.
Well, we as Nucleate Norway and Nucleate in general only excited about new opportunities for young trainees or whoever wants to start dig into the field of bio or ecotech entrepreneurship. And we also just thinking about this as more opportunities people have, better the future will be. And good luck with the Forge, and we will try to help you as much as possible. Okay, so Markus, what about you? What's the
Sure.
opportunities in Denmark?
First of all, I guess I should say that one of the best opportunities is to actually get involved in Nucleate activities, because it's really a great vehicle for the earliest steps of figuring out what to do with your science. Could you commercialize it? In some ways also it's nice that it's independent of the university, so it's the founders, the people who are actually doing the research, figuring out like how to best proceed. So we really appreciate all of that, and we very much love to collaborate with Nucleate, not just in Denmark but across the world. We offer quite a lot of different things, but the most important things are for people who are interested primarily in the training education part. We offer a summer school every August, 1 week, case-based learning focusing on therapeutics and planetary health, and also health technologies, medtech, where it's basically working on your own case, or at least a related case in your field, to work towards a pitch that you can actually present to our team. And the unique part is that our people who work with startups in our programs will also help mentor in the summer school. And then our main funding instrument for people who really want to start a company is called Venture Lab. We have 2 calls open. We just closed the call here a few weeks ago, so we don't have an open call right now, but it comes again in over the summer. And there you are basically gonna get a €500,000 convertible loan and an acceleration program, our mentorship, and access to our network, and also access to the space, the labs that we have, if that's something that you want. So that's our primary activity. We usually get between 80 to 90 applicants for 10 spots for the Venture Lab program. So those are the main activities. Otherwise, it's just a good idea to follow us on social media, LinkedIn primarily nowadays. and also follow our website, sign up for the newsletter. That's probably the best way to keep up to date on other things. We are working on internationalizing our activities, so hopefully we'll also land in other geographies over the next few years. But I can't tell too many details about that yet. Our calls are open to everyone, but we only fund companies that have a Danish registration.
More incentive to come to Denmark. But all of this sounds like great opportunities and for more and more people to just jump in, which is great. But going a bit beyond Scandinavia and specifically Norway and Denmark, maybe you can share what are the current trends in life science that you might think are interesting in terms of future development, like maybe there is something like AI with AlphaFold who revolutionized the protein structure prediction. What are the trends right now after AI or with AI in life science that might have great impact on biology and ecology in general? Andy?
Yeah, I mean, AlphaFold is a fantastic kind of use case for what you can do with AI. That unlocked a kind of real step change in the protein prediction question. And even though that was started by a kind of company, the academic world kind of saw what they did and has really caught up with the kind of the performance level offered by AlphaFold. So that it kind of that a rising sea kind of raises all boats essentially in that sense. And there's lots of other kind of interesting opportunities for AI. So there's building on AlphaFold. AlphaFold kind of gives you the kind of first ability to predict. But there's many more opportunities to do designing different kind of properties, ability to interact with different receptors, kind of novel protein mechanisms or other kind of biological molecules, nucleotides and things. And then kind of away from the biology, there's also huge opportunities for AI in terms of integration into clinical trials, even down to kind of looking at and analyzing different commercial opportunities and triaging those, looking at patent landscapes and those kind of things. So I think, the AI is certainly kind of not going away. And, like all of these things, it goes through hype cycles. But I think we'll see kind of much more kind of practical use cases rather than just kind of pure hype over the next few years. Quantum's another great example. I think we'll see much more in terms of the interface between biotechnology and other emerging fields, like quantum. And I think, yeah, breaking down the traditional kind of boundaries, I think is something that will yield some really exciting kind of opportunities over the next few years.
Amazing insights. Markus, what do you
Sure.
think?
I think I'll start from the opposite end, so not from the technologies. I mean, AI certainly being the dominant one right now, and some other ones also coming. But looking at what like kind of societal or unmet needs are emerging that maybe were less prominent before. So I mean, on the human health side, we are of course all hopefully looking towards having more healthy aging and being able to combat some of the diseases that come with age, like neurodegenerative diseases, where we really don't have a lot of curative treatments. Same is true for the other areas where you can look like, okay, well, why do we not have treatments? I mean, we have actually quite a lot of good cancer treatments right now, but we don't have great women's health treatments for almost any conditions that affect women for a variety of reasons. So we've decided to put quite a lot of effort into looking at these areas where we can see that there's a strong unmet need and encourage entrepreneurs to take their solution towards those areas. So that's sort of on the human health side. So generally, how are we going to deal with the aging society issues? On the planetary health, of course, almost everything we need to sort out new ways. So agriculture being a big one, materials, another one where like everything I sit on, the whole room is made out of stuff that we probably shouldn't have invented in the first place. It works great, but it's just not very sustainable. So there's huge need to reinvent entire value chains, from ag to food to materials, chemicals, everything. Carbon capture, of course, how do we make energy? All of that, there's a role for biotech, not in everything as the only solution, but as a key solution. And then finally, the area that, now in this geopolitical situation has become very prominent is kind of societal resilience. So like, okay, we can of course make great products, but how do we ensure that we have safe societies, we have safe supply chains, we have good communication? So there's the sort of deep tech angle is coming into play. So things that previously you would have thought, okay, that's mainly a military issue, now suddenly it becomes a fundamental issue for having a functioning society. So I think those sort of three broad areas, looking at human health challenges going forward, that's where the new innovations are needed, and that's where we need the AI, the quantum, all of that, putting it together, solving new problems, using the whole technology stack that we have, which is pretty amazing nowadays. So I think that's what we believe in.
Mm. Well, as you mentioned, there are plenty of challenges, but usually challenges boost innovation and making the world a better place. So let's hope that Denmark and Norway, with their nice ecosystem and opportunities, can help there. But coming closer to the end of our panel, maybe we can switch a bit more to lighter and fun topics. Personally, I'm living now in Oslo, and many people are asking me how cold and dark it is. So, Andy, as you are here only for 18 months, maybe you can share your first impression of Scandinavia and specifically Norway, and maybe what to expect for those young talents who will want to come to Norway and start their companies here, what to expect?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly recommend anyone who's thinking about coming to Norway to give it a go. It's a really kind of friendly, safe place to come. We had a kind of rather brutal introduction to Norwegian winters. So I actually live in a place called Arendal, which is kind of the southern tip of Norway, one of the warmest kind of areas of Norway. But about once every 10 years, it gets this kind of huge snow dump. And so basically we'd quite recently arrived from the UK, and we had a kind of couple of flurries of snow and thought, oh, this is very picturesque. Go out and take some photos. And then on New Year, we had a kind of meter and a half over 24 hours. The car was buried, having to kind of push snow out the way to get out the front door and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, you have to be prepared. It's part of it's part of the culture. But definitely, everybody comes out. All the neighbors were out shoveling snow and talking to each other. So it is part of the society that kind of comes together. Norwegians are traditionally not that sociable, but when it snows, then everyone suddenly is everyone's friend, and they're digging everyone's drive out. So yeah, it's like any place, it's got its kind of own unique elements.
For me personally, it was the most amazing that Norwegians are running all the times, even when it's ice. When I cannot even walk without sleeping, Norwegians are running and without any issues and with kids and doing everything perfectly. But it's probably a gene or a talent.
I think it's all about the gear. It's all about like there's that expression in Norway. There's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate gear. So you look at the kids; they're out all year round. They just have all the most expensive, best waterproofs and cold weather gear.
Yeah, but actually this phrase I think also relevant to Denmark, because when I first time came to Copenhagen, I heard the phrase, actually the story that parents leave their children outside in cold because children feel better. It's not like it's too warm, too cold, and they can relax and just enjoy the fresh weather. It just tells you a lot about how safe the country is, and also that you from a very young age get used to rain, wind, and cold.
Yeah, I guess you definitely should get used to wind. You should not ask me for an opinion on weather because I'm from central Finland. So
Okay.
this is like basically beach destination compared to that. But I think it's quite similar in some ways. The wind is your constant companion here, but especially the city of Copenhagen is an absolutely beautiful place to be in, and also very dynamic and active in a sort of positive way, non-dangerous. Full of hygge and nice bars and cafes and other places to hang out. And we also have done a lot of work at BII in particular to build a good community. So with probably about 1,000 people going through our programs and working in our companies, not all, of course, in our building, it's not uncommon. And we even have some bars that are run by people who used to be working in one of our companies. So it's not uncommon if you go out for a beer or for a cup of coffee to run into people that have been part of the community. So it's a little bit trying to create that feeling like a family for life science entrepreneurs. That's what we are going for. So very much doing the cozy, but doing the cozy in a way that's not your own family, but it's the family of people, like-minded entrepreneurs.
It's called Hygge, right? In Denmark.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm. Well, with such nice introduction to both of the countries in terms of both life and work, you should expect lots of young talents from all over the world very soon. And with time coming closer, thank you very much for your time and such a nice discussion. And I think we can start to answer the questions in the chat. So the first question is, how does the Norwegian exit tax affect startups and growing businesses? I think it's the question to Andy.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm not an accountant, so please don't take anything I say as kind of legal or accounting advice. But yeah, I think there are kind of different taxation rules in Norway which can kind of negatively impact on people's kind of entrepreneurship mindset. Partially, we have this kind of wealth tax in Norway. So, which is a great way of redistributing wealth. And Norway is one of the most equal countries in the world. And basically what that means is everybody has a great standard of life. I mean, from a startup point of view, one of the issues is that in the UK, for example, you only get taxed on like an exit or something at the point where you actually realize the benefit of that. So when you sell the company. In Norway, again, I'm not a total expert on this, but if you own a part of a company and that's valued at a certain amount, then that can go on your register of your kind of wealth, even if it's a kind of just paper value for the company at that stage. So that can kind of be perhaps a disincentive for people, but there are kind of always ways around this, and it's about kind of cleverly structuring your company, and obviously you need to talk to a good accountant at the point you want to do that.
Quite interesting. And actually the same question also for Denmark. Can you please elaborate,
Sure.
Mark?
Yeah, so traditionally there have been quite a lot of issues with taxation of startups, especially if you have rapidly growing startup that has a lot of valuation changes. There have been improvements very recently into the taxation to make it less complicated to manage that situation. I mean, is it as favorable as the best places in terms of entrepreneurship? Probably not. However, there are some other benefits like pretty minimal overhead on compliance due to simple rules and simple bureaucracy for the company. So you're wasting less money on lawyers otherwise if you're operating your company out of Denmark. There's of course also the question of personal income taxation, which is pretty high in all Scandinavian countries. Having lived both in the US for a long time and having lived in 2 different Scandinavian countries quite extensively, I mean, if you live for a longer time in these countries, you definitely get your money back from the taxes. So it's a little bit more about whether you like the social public goods, the public schools, the public universities, all of that, or you prefer to pay for that yourself. And I happen to like the setup where I don't need to worry about that part. I can focus on running the business here and not thinking about what do I get, how do my kids get an education.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So then we can move to another question. And the question is, do Denmark and Norway invest or reinvest their sovereign wealth funds into local R&D and local innovation ecosystems? So maybe Markus, you can start.
Yeah, very much so. So the Danish fund is now called IFO. It used to have a different name. And they're both active as a startup investor, as a loan giver, but also as a LP limited partner in many venture funds, and also in venture funds outside of Denmark, which helps with the internationalization of the ecosystem. So many European venture funds have them as an investor. So yeah, it's an active part of the government's strategy to support the startup growth by their funds.
Do you want to see any change there?
Well, I'm sure that you can always optimize the setup, but overall we are pretty happy with the way it's working, and happy to see how active the government has decided to be in these terms. So and also them being an LP, so basically investing in other funds, really helps to distribute the decision making, because if it's only the fund making decisions, then it's very centralized. But now it means that the actual decision making, which companies are funded, happens very distributed, also with people who are not based in Denmark, which is super important. So we greatly benefit from all of those activities. I'm very happy that's happening.
I see. It's clear. What about Norway then? You're muted.
Yeah. So Norway has quite a different model for its sovereign wealth fund. It invests mainly in publicly available shares. Actually, the sovereign wealth fund owns about 1.5% of all the publicly traded shares in the world, which is incredible given the relative size of Norway to the rest of the world. But I think what it does mean is it doesn't have that same direct flow back to Norwegian innovation. Yeah, I would love to see something similar to the setup that they have in Denmark, and that's maybe something we could learn from.
Well, let's see how it will go. So the next question is, how does being in the European Union versus not affect regulation and the subsequent road to market?
I guess we are the ones who are officially in the EU, although Norway has a lot of the same regulatory landscape. So I mean, it depends where you are bringing your product to market, right? So whether you are, it's not the location, headquarters location of the company that matters, but where you're actually selling. So in that sense, it doesn't. I mean, sometimes it makes sense to go to the US market, sometimes to Brazilian market, to India market, sometimes to a European market. Certainly the regulatory climate in Europe in general is a little bit complicated. So for an early stage company, there's more work to figure out how to navigate that if that's your choice to enter the European market. And also it's a little bit more fragmented market. So it's important to understand that there you need to look at each country, at least from the sales channel perspective, you have actually actively selling. But very early stage companies usually are not primarily focused on direct market entry unless you have food product or something like that. So typically we see this as something that's not a big detriment for the early stage, and then later it can be an issue that you're maybe mainly selling in another geography, and then your growth will also be in that geography.
Makes sense. What maybe you can comment, Andy?
Yeah, sure. Interesting fact about Norway, although it's not in the EU, it's had a couple of referenda to see, and it's always people have chosen not to go in. But even though it's not part of the EU, it actually implements EU regulation, nearly all of EU regulation, and actually most of the time Norway implements those regulations before the rest of the EU. Just because it's a fairly small country, it's easy to implement regulation. And for whatever reason that they choose to kind of be strict, to stick very strictly to EU regulation. So from a kind of pure regulatory compliance point of view, I wouldn't see like a major difference in the way you'd have to operate in Norway and in the EU. I think you just face exactly the same challenges that Markus articulated. I think the main thing if you were starting a business is to kind of, you don't have to know the exact ins and outs of the regulatory system in every territory, but I guess you have to kind of start building in what your route to market in general might look like, what the timescales for that might be, how that might affect where you might go first. I mean, for diagnostics, the area I know best, EU CE mark used to be one of the easiest certifications to get, and then when the new IVD directive came in the EU, that it suddenly became one of the most difficult places to regulate. So then people were moving much more towards a kind of US first model.
I guess one thing to actually point out with respect to regulation is that in the sustainability space, it works in the opposite beneficial direction, because the EU is much more active on requiring these things from large corporates that are selling things on European markets. So it means that, for example, supply chains have to be made much more sustainable, which creates super nice opportunities for startups to then provide those sustainable solutions. So it's sort of a dual-edged thing. It's a little bit more restricted than a pharmaceutical, and especially on medtech, it is a little bit heavy now, the regulation, but on sustainability, it's the enabling factor that allows some certainty for a startup to develop a solution.
Very interesting. And the last question is, for the Norwegian startup project, is it necessary to set up a company in Denmark to be eligible for most convertible, non-convertible grants from Novo Nordisk and other Danish agencies?
Okay, I guess I should answer that. So granting schemes exist that have like a Nordic scope from the Novo Nordisk Foundation. So there's no requirement to be have a Danish partner or things like that. Now, for our funding, where we give convertible loans, there needs to be a Danish registered company, and the activities need to primarily be based in Denmark for tax reasons. For us, tax reasons. We are non-profit, so the tax authorities might not look at it very positively if we didn't have some requirements for spending the money primarily in Denmark.
I hope it answered the questions, and the time is coming to end the session. Thank you very much, Markus and Andy, for spending an hour of your time with us and providing so much insights and inspiration to do lots of interesting things in Denmark and Norway. And I look forward, as me personally and as Nucleate, to collaborate with you in the future. Thanks also for all the participants and guests who attended this session. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again in our next series that will cover other regions. And overall, we look forward to collaborate and expand the life science community all over the world and help to make the world a better place. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for having us.